Hello and welcome to the second critique on this channel. Currently, this second critique is on a game that I do love. I will eventually be doing them on different games so I can be a bit more objective than just kind of these ones. I try my best to kind of point out more nitpicky sort of things, but because of my love for these games, it is a struggle. But overall, I am doing these currently on games that I love talking about, and hopefully you do too, and that's why you're here to learn more about either Assassin's Creed stuff, or you're wanting just to see a video talking about one of your favourite games as well. Today we will be talking about Ezio Collection, so that is 2 Brotherhood and Revelations, and also the final little story to Ezio's entire storyline in general, which is Embers. During this, I want to talk about Ezio as a character and the development of him throughout these 3 games. But not only that, I do want to talk about the gameplay and pretty much all the upgrades and kind of the idea of each story. At the end of each story, when I've gone through them, I will then talk about basically the areas of it that I thought were a bit off, either that or just different areas of the game that I just did not like in general, that sort of thing. So yeah, that will be where more the critiques start. But overall, I love this trilogy. First time I ever played through Assassin's Creed 2 was in 2012. It would have been my 10th birthday at the time when I got the Xbox 360, and a little bit later my friend brought over my first ever copy of Assassin's Creed 2. We played the game for about 2 to 3 hours overall, and honestly, the moment I finished playing it on his disc, I was just like, I need to get this game, and I couldn't wait. I got AC2 and Revelations at the same time, mainly because I didn't realise Brotherhood was a thing until AC3 came out, so I played AC3 the moment I realised it was a thing, and then also played AC3. And ever since, I've always loved these 3 games in particular, with 2 of them being my favourite Assassin's Creed games, and Revelations having a very soft spot in my heart. It might be one of the shortest Assassin's Creed games out there, but it caps off Ezio's story in such a wonderful way. I found that I loved the Assassin's Creed franchise solely because of these games. All of these 3 games are amazing, all the ones you get in the Ezio Collection. However, honestly, the second game is the one that sticks out the most for me in terms of the best game in the franchise. It's the game with the most replay value in my opinion anyway, and overall has the most gripping story and just one of the best that gaming has to offer. But with that being said, I hope you guys do enjoy this video. This video did take a long time to make, ridiculous amounts of time to be honest. I spent a lot of time working on this project, and if you wouldn't mind leaving a like and subscribing to see more content like this in the future, that would be amazing. And with that being said, we'll now actually begin with this video. The story of ACR Story begins on the 24th of June 1459. On this day you see Ezio's father giving him his name. It then cuts to 1476 where you're seeing him at 17 years of age, and you'll find one of the best openings in any game, and one of the best ways to start off the trend of the Assassin's Creed title cards. Ezio's gathered all the guys who are willing to go against the Pazzi family and start to fight the young Vieri de Pazzi, who is fighting on behalf of his family. For both of these young guys, they're both experiencing for the first time the Assassins vs Templar war without even realising it yet. And after fighting each other, Vieri will run away from Ezio and Federico. The older brother will then make you go to the doctor to see Ezio's lip, just get it checked out, and both of you will run to the top of the tower and then begin at the end of Ezio's life as he knows it anyway, and the beginning of a whole new one as Ezio and his brother look out over Florence.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. They never change.
And may it never change us.
After Ezio jumps off the tower, he'll find his way over to Christina's house, where his father will be extremely mad and just call the guards for you to get out of there. You make your way back to the Auditore house in Florence and see your father, Giovanni. He talks about what Ezio did and how reckless it is, but it reminds him of his younger self. Now this is again a way of foreshadowing and setting up what will then become Ezio's life. You'll come to know more about Ezio's dad over the next couple missions, however your main actual area that you can learn more about him is in the actual prologue of this game. Throughout these missions you won't be able to gain tons of knowledge about Giovanni, however you kind of get little bits of an idea of what's going on. And after doing some things for the family, Ezio will then head back to the house where he'll find his father and brothers are both gone, however his sister and mother are the only ones left. You go to the last known location of where they're being held captive, and after talking to him you'll find out about this hidden room inside the house. And then when you go in there and actually enter this room, you end up getting the best assassin's robes of all time, and I don't care what anyone says, they are one of the best. I think Ezio's in Revelations is actually better in my opinion, but in 2 they are amazing robes. After donning the hood, he's going to head off to Alberto's house to hand over the evidence to show that they didn't commit treason. After giving Alberto what he needs to prove Giovanni's innocence, you'll see a guy in black robes in the background. This is again more foreshadowing for what's to come, and kind of just a metaphor overall throughout this game of how the strings get pulled in different directions, either by assassin or Templar. The next day you'll head to the main square where the trial is being held. Alberto is there and the dark hooded man in the background again, and Alberto claims there is no evidence to prove otherwise, and with this, they will be sentenced to death. Giovanni knows he is lying, and so does Ezio, so he starts to run as quick as he can to get through the crowd, to then hear the order being given that Giovanni, Federico, and Pederico all have the floor removed from below them, and all of them end up hung. Ezio is in total rage at this point and tries to help out as much as he can, but he's too late. You have to run away, and with that, the first sequence of this game has ended. Now after this, Ezio will be greeted by one of the maids just outside of the house, who's been working for the family this entire time, and lets him know that his mother and sister are both safe, and they're actually at her sister's house. You meet Paola for the first time, and later on you find out that she is a member of the Assassin Brotherhood. She'll teach you how to do social stealth, so one of the core mechanics of Assassin's Creed. A lot of these early sequences in any of the games are just teaching you basic things, and with that you'll learn where you need to go to plot your revenge. You go and meet up with Leonardo again, and with that he'll fix your hidden blade for you, and then you'll go and assassinate the first person that you ever kill in this entire trilogy, Alberto Alberti. He is a man who's betrayed Ezio's dad, which led to the death of him and all of his family around him. Ezio will tell every single person what has happened, and after this you'll go back to Paola and she'll basically tell you that you need to lower your status level. This introduces you to something that a lot of the games have after this, basically just meaning that you can lower how many guards end up seeing you and notice you. Now after you've done all of this, Ezio will take his mother and sister out of the city to the Auditory Manor. Now to begin sequence 3 of this game, Ezio is on his way to the manor and you end up getting interrupted by Vieri and his men. Now he will try to fight you, and then your Uncle Mario will then show up and introduce himself. After the fight you'll go with Mario into the manor. After doing some errands and some training, where the game will basically teach you more about some basic information, you'll learn more about Ezio's dad and a little bit more about the Assassin Brotherhood. Mario also gets a bit mad at Ezio, mainly because Ezio wants to run off to Spain, and after Ezio realizes what he should be doing, he then heads off to go find Mario, and with that he will then kill Vieri. Now this is something that you'll see in a great way in terms of Ezio's progression as a character, however I'm not going to talk about that until we get to the character development section. Now though, after you assassinate Vieri, you'll end up getting some more information about the codex pages, and you'll end up getting explained to about the codex pages, the best idea anyway that Mario knows about them, and also Ezio will then just grab some more around the villa. In the next sequence you'll get introduced to Lorenzo, who is an ally to the assassins. During this time, however, the Templars are plotting to kill him, so that's something they're trying to avoid happening. You'll also get introduced to some other areas of the Assassin's Creed 2 game, and some other areas of other games as well, which is the Assassin's Tombs. And by the time you're done with Florence, you have 2 out of the 6 of them towards the Altair armor set, which realistically is really easy endgame content. However, I think that is definitely how it was designed, as this game is a lot more story-based more than anything else. Now after you've done some of these things, you'll find yourself having to assassinate Francesco, and with that, Florence ends up under full Medici control. After all this, you then head off to go kill another Templar and his small group of accomplices, Jacopo. He'll lead you to a meeting where you'll then be encountered into the hooded figure once again. He's talking with Rodrigo Borgia, the man who's believed to be behind the death of Ezio's family. However, Ezio still doesn't fully understand why. After Rodrigo kills Jacopo, you just end up finishing him off, and with that, you just get another name off of Ezio's list. In sequence 6, you end up finding Leonardo in the mountain district, and he'll be basically getting hunted down by the Borgia Guard. After you've got Leonardo to where he needs to be, you'll basically be meeting Caterina for the first time, then you'll be heading off to Venice. In Venice, you'll learn the most useful thing in this entire game, and that's being able to jump a bit higher. You end up meeting a woman and you give her a helping hand, as she ends up taking an arrow to the leg, and you need to just give her a hand and get her to where she needs to be. Now after this, you'll meet Antonio, who is again an assassin. However, Ezio is still unaware of anyone who is an assassin, as he's not actually indoctrinated into the Brotherhood yet. After this, you then help him and they assassinate Emilio. Ezio is becoming a lot more wiser at this point, as just a few hours ago you were playing as him, and he was basically just a kid. He'll be stalking the Spaniard as you know him, at least by name, and listening to the Templars and their current plans. Now you'll be scouting around the Basilisca, and the Templars are planning to kill Montesinico. After a bit of setup, you'll finally be using Leonardo's flying machine, which honestly, one of the best things of playing these games is just you learn some random bits of history. I remember having an art lesson where this popped up and all I thought about was Assassin's Creed at the time. After you've kicked some guys off the rooftops, you'll end up finding yourself on top of this building, and Carlo tells Ezio that he's already too late, under the circumstances, and he's already been framed for the Doge's death. Ezio will then be in need to kill another man, the one who took the place of the Doge after his death. For Ezio to do this, however, he'll need to be entering a party. In this party, Ezio will then be assassinating the man who is required to die. The next sequence of this game, you'll be meeting Bartolomeo for the first time, and who he is truly in love with, Bianca, which is his sword. Now, after helping him out, you basically end up freeing some of his men from Borgia control, and with that you'll fight a man called Dante, and he'll lead you straight to Silvio, which will then kill both of them in a mission named Two Birds, One Blade. Sequence 11, in my opinion, is the third best sequence in this game, behind the first sequence and the 13th sequence. Now in this sequence, Ezio will try to kill the Spaniard, aka Rodrigo Borgia. Before this, however, Ezio finds these guards bringing something to Venice. Mario will also be following them as well. After getting undercover with one of the guards, you end up taking it and meeting Rodrigo and fighting him, and all the assassins will start to show up. However, Ezio is still confused of why they're there. Right at the end of the sequence, Ezio will meet the assassins, and with all of them present, he will end up having his finger burned to name him into the Creed, uttering the words, "Nothing is true and everything is permitted."
La Shea Waka Umutlak Bel Kulun Munkin. These are the words spoken by our ancestors that lay at the heart of our creed.
Where other men blindly follow the truth, remember.
Nothing is true.
Where other men are limited by morality or law, remember.
Everything is permitted.
We work in the dark to serve the light. We are assassins.
Nothing is true.
Everything is permitted.
It is time, Ezio. In this modern age, we are not so literal as our ancestors, but our seal is no less permanent. Are you ready to join us?
I am.
This only hurts for a while, brother. Like so many things.
Benvenuto, Ezio. You are one of us now. Come, we have much to do.
Now though, however, one of the biggest U-turns in my opinion in the whole of this entire franchise. I don't care how much you hate other games, this is my least favourite sequence in the whole of Assassin's Creed, and that is sequence 12. It brings the pace of this game right down, and honestly when I first ever played through this game, I don't recall this being a sequence in this game. I googled it, looked it up, and apparently it was in the game since the beginning. However, I never remember it. It just feels like such a waste of time. They add on literally about an extra hour and a half of content for the sake of it. It's the biggest load of just filler content overall. It serves no purpose to the story. You can tell the actual development of this sequence was absolutely rubbish. The only bit that's actually good about this is his end conversation that he has with the people, which beforehand, before killing the guy who he ends up killing throughout this sequence, he does what basically Jon Snow does in Game of Thrones and gives the man mercy instead of letting him burn to death.
Silenzio! Silenzio! 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now and watched my loved ones die, betrayed by those I had called friends. Vengeance clouded my mind. It would have consumed me, were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers who taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself. We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Not Savonarola, not the Medici. We are free to follow our own path. There are those who will take that freedom from us. Too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers, show you the path. Choose your own way. Do not follow me or anyone else.
But again, this speech kind of redeems this sequence to a degree. Honestly, this sequence could have been in the game if they just cut it down a little bit, but I think it was a little bit too long and changed the pacing of this game up way too much. Now, the grand final of this game, the beloved end to Assassin's Creed 2. Ezio will head to Rome to kill Rodrigo, who is now the Pope, the most powerful man on the planet at this point. After the most stealth you do throughout this entire game, you'll end up jumping down to assassinate the man that you saw hiding at the back of the room whilst you delivered the proof that your father didn't commit the crimes, the treason that was blamed upon him, and you're actually about to seek revenge for the first time you get your revenge within this game to kill this man. Ezio goes against the teachings of Mario and lets his anger and revenge just fuel him throughout this fight. However, Rodrigo grabs the Staff of Eden, which is the papal staff in real life, and Ezio goes flying away and basically you end up having a little fight with 2 pieces of Eden, which was interesting, I guess, at the time. Rodrigo then runs away into the vault after defeating Ezio and basically combines the apple and the staff. He uses it to open the vault, however it's not fully opening for Rodrigo. Ezio gives him a fair fist fight, and after Ezio wins, Rodrigo asks him to kill him. However, Ezio realizes that his death will not bring back the lives of his family and is done with the vengeance and rage basically being his compass in life. Ezio opens the vault to find Minerva, and with that the introduction into the beings of the first civilization, the ones that were labelled gods and myths. She warns of catastrophic events that are going to affect the Earth and has done before. A great extinction level event. By the end of her speech, you end up finding out that she's actually talking to Desmond and not Ezio. Ezio is the prophet, as Desmond was destined to relive Ezio's memories, which then goes down the idea of whether or not free will exists, especially within the Assassin's Creed universe. After that, the game will cut to black and you'll be back in the modern day, with Templars coming in and surrounding the assassins. You'll help out by killing them as Desmond. However, with that, you see basically the comparison between when Desmond was first fighting at the beginning of the game and now he's a lot better off now that he's gone through the bleeding effect. After Vidic runs away, basically, the assassins then have to hit the road, and that's where you'll end up at the beginning of Brotherhood. However, before we talk about Brotherhood, I want to talk about AC2 as a game itself. The opening of Assassin's Creed 2 is one that people love to this day. It's the start of what is considered the most iconic Assassin's Creed opening that got ruined over time. I want to talk about how this game sets you up for something extraordinary. This is something that you don't know as a player, but this moment is something that is the turning point in Ezio's life and the turning point of this game. You have what I like to call the light side of the story. This is something that I find in many different areas of just films and games in general, of just liking the more light heart of the story. For example, I love the prequels of Star Wars. I think the originals are great, but overall I more enjoy watching the prequels and the Clone Wars. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but it's kind of not now. It's more just popular to hate on the sequels now, but overall it's just the more happier, brighter story that I do like. However, I do still love the third Star Wars film, Anakin Turns to the Dark Side. I think those prequels did darkness in a decent light, where it wasn't too dark to the point where it was just kind of depressing to watch, and I think these games do a good job of it too. Now, the thing that I love about the title card of this game is honestly that you end up finding that this title card is effectively the switch in Ezio's life. This is him now having to accept that his life is changing forever. He's about to lose everyone that he's been close to, and the only person he still has is Claudia, as his mother is a different person at this point, and dealing with the loss of her children and her husband has made her completely mute, and this is when the game definitely starts to go down a darker tone. But I want to talk about the gameplay and graphics of this game. For the first time in gaming history at this point, parkour was just a next level thing that they could design, and they made it really amazing. However, everyone can universally agree at this point in the modern age that the parkour mechanics of this game nowadays are absolutely dreadful. Luckily in Brotherhood it gets a little bit better and less clunky and easy to mess up, however, still. Now though, the fighting in this game is good, especially for the time that it came out, but Unity is still the pinnacle of this, and honestly, even the new generation Assassin's Creed games I prefer the actual combat overall for. Like I said though, I think Unity was meant to be the kind of pinnacle of the old gen Assassin's Creed games, you know, with the parkour mechanics and with the combat fighting anyway. We know this to an extent because the original team who made Assassin's Creed 2, aka Ubisoft Montreal, they actually started development on Unity the moment they finished Assassin's Creed 2, and Assassin's Creed 2 came out in 2011, so that gives you a rough idea. You didn't get Unity until basically late 2014, so they had been working on the game for quite a while. However, the one game that I do think got completely overshadowed throughout the entire process of the new gen consoles was Assassin's Creed Rogue, which I will make a video on eventually, as honestly it is one of the most underrated Assassin's Creed games ever. The side content of AC2 isn't too prevalent overall, however I do think in Brotherhood they kind of went up a little bit too much in my opinion. However, in AC2 you kind of get some basic stuff, not too much to really do, it's kind of just basic collectibles. The main thing really was Altair's armor, which is something that you kind of need to finish the game anyway, so that you get the proper full ending, but not only that, you also get the best looking armor in the entire Assassin's Creed franchise, in my opinion. Besides that though, you kind of just have broken memories, and that's about it in terms of side content. However, this game was the last in the franchise really to even have tons of collectibles. After this, you see it in Rogue, you see it in Revelations, you then see it in 3, 4, Unity, Rogue, Syndicate, basically just tons of collectibles. All of these games have ridiculous amounts of just side content to do, which is just not fun side content, it's just achievement hunter side content. And half of them, you don't even get achievements for collecting everything. So it's kind of one of those things that just doesn't need to be in the game. I'm not a big fan of it, and a lot of games, I kind of think a lot of games should stick to trying to be a good narrative instead of just trying to fill the game up with loads of filler content. The sandbox itself, however, is something that has great value, especially back when it first came out. Compared to today's standards, it wouldn't even go past the drawing board, however for the time, it was an amazing accomplishment that Ubisoft were able to pull off, making such an epic, realistic and breathable open world. Now that being said though, we'll get into one of the best games in the franchise, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. When Brotherhood starts, you get into the beginning monologue where Desmond is explaining basically everything that's happened between the Templars and Assassins. At this point though, you're only shown the Assassin's point of view and their way of working, so basically it's sympathetic to them. So it's basically a sympathetic explanation towards the Assassins. It then cuts into a sequence that we don't know of yet. Ezio is trying to kill a man that we're unaware of. The game has a really good job of making you think what will happen just won't happen. By telling us Mario has led him here, he'll then get thrown off the man and you see Ezio on horseback overlooking the city that's being sacked. It will then cut again and we are back with Ezio in the vault at the ending of Assassin's Creed 2. When Ezio comes out of the vault, he then sees the Pope's robes on the floor, but there is no Pope to be seen to match them. Ezio tries to remove the staff from the pedestal, however it lowers itself into the ground and it lowers Ezio with it. Mario, however, is above you and Ezio and Mario start heading their way out of Rome. You climb to the top of the tower with Mario and Ezio doesn't know whether or not he should throw the apple into the river. So Mario basically just tells him to make his decision later as he doesn't need to decide right now. They then jump off and that's when the opening of Brotherhood has begun. This would be classed as the opening, however I class this more as like the pre-opening of this game. Purely because, to be honest, there isn't much going on besides you escaping the ending of the second game, so in reality I think the actual Sequence 1 ending is the ending of the first part of this game truly. It's now 1500 and Ezio's around 40 years of age. Yes, we do definitely go from Ezio being 17 at the beginning of Assassin's Creed 2, or at least what you first see of him when he's a bit more of an adult, and then he becomes 40 by the end of that game. In these 3 games, he ends up being 65 by the end of his actual story. However, in Revelations, he's roughly about 52 years of age. Ezio and Mario are now back in the Auditory Villa, catching up on basically everything that's happened. And something wonderful ends up happening. You can ride your horse into the villa, which is something that you weren't able to do in the previous game, and it was very annoying. After talking with Claudia briefly, you end up doing some small tasks around the city that basically sets you up for what is to come, but you do not know of yet. The opening of this game is just pure foreshadowing. It's done at its greatest within this opening section. You'll find Caterina inside of the villa and basically talk briefly to her about the reasons why she's there. Ezio will then tell everyone what he's experienced, and Machiavelli will basically ask if Rodrigo begged for his life or offered anything in return to spare him. Ezio will wait a brief moment and then basically let them know that he did not kill him, which upsets Machiavelli a lot, to the point where he basically just says, stop talking about all this nonsense, you need to finish your job first. After their discussion, Machiavelli just leaves and heads off to Rome. Ezio and Caterina will end up basically doing what they wanted to do since the first time they ever met each other, and then awake after a cannonball comes straight through the villa. Ezio tries to help with the attack, but the man from the beginning of the game comes through the front city gates. However, Mario is the first one through the city. Caterina has been caught by the man's side, and he has the apple. Ezio starts to run across the rooftops towards Uncle Mario, the most recent upgrade in the gun that Leonardo has invented, as Uncle Mario gets shot. After the escape at the back route of the villa, Ezio tells Claudia to take their mother back to Florence. And Ezio will then head off to Rome. Ezio falls off his horse, however, on the way to Rome, and then that's the end of the introduction of this game. After this, you're then brought into the modern day of the Auditory Villa, and setting up camp in the secret chamber next to Altair's armor. During this bit, you're basically just seeing the story build up between Lucy and Desmond. After heading back into the Animus, Ezio awakens and is being cared for by a woman who he is unfamiliar with. He is told after being given the robes that are a lot more whiter and a lot more redder than the original ones, that he needs to go find Machiavelli. Before doing so, however, Ezio will help out a townsperson, and basically this is just kind of showing you an idea of how much Ezio has grown, as he wouldn't have done that sort of thing beforehand. He basically helps out a guy who's been getting terrorized by pretty much trying to help out his family, and because his wife has been hung, he wants to cut her down from being hung, and the guy who's done it doesn't want him to do it and just wants him to just pretty much sit there and grieve the entire time. You then meet up with Machiavelli, and you'll end up basically getting a brief tutorial of how the new fort systems work, which is something you then find throughout future Assassin's Creed games and just Ubisoft games in general. After meeting up with Machiavelli's contact, you'll find a man who has information that he was supposed to be getting. You then get stopped by the followers of Romulus, and after going through their hideouts, you'll meet Machiavelli once again, and basically that will be the end of that. You kind of get explained to about who they are, everything like that. You get that armor set that you can get that doesn't look too great, but overall that is the end of Sequence 2, which is pretty much just an introduction to some side content that you can do within this game. It's a bit lacking on the story front, however overall it's just giving you a basic introduction of what's going on. You also get introduced to Fabio, who is Bartolomeo's cousin. Ezio will then leave the hideout to find friends and allies. You have the same group of people who the assassins join with each time. One being the whorehouse, which eventually you basically end up doing a little mission for. Claudia then takes over as owner / accountant for the business. Then you have basically what Ezio uses as common knowledge. They basically just use the whorehouses in Assassin's Creed to gain knowledge of what the people are basically just doing, and Templars in general. After this, you then meet up with Volpe again, and he is basically the leader of the thieves in Rome, and basically they'll join your side, whilst Volpe is doing some snooping on Machiavelli, as he believes that he's the one who betrayed the Brotherhood due to basically escaping the Villa attack, and he's the one who walked into a public setting with Cesare Borgia, who you then find out at the time is the guy behind the Villa attack, who is also Rodrigo's son, so there is that as well. After getting the thieves on your side, you then end up meeting up with Bartolomeo again. You head to a camp that's just outside of his place, basically just take it out. Ezio is about to confront Machiavelli, but doesn't really know if he should be doing so, or if it's the right thing to be doing, as he's basically just getting told as well the information that Machiavelli might have been getting told at the same time. After making their plans, Ezio will then go to kill Cesare. However, he learns that Caterina is actually being held captive in the castle. You'll climb the walls, and whilst you're doing so, you learn that Cesare is leaving the place and that Rodrigo also isn't there in the first place, so Ezio goes in to get Caterina. But before Cesare leaves or anything like that, you see a little cutscene between Cesare and Lucrezia, as they're basically in an incestual relationship, something that you basically just see throughout the game, and she pretty much ends up getting a bit salty and gets annoyed at Caterina, beats her with a stick for a little bit, and then basically just doesn't like the idea that Cesare could be with another woman that's not his sister. You'll enter the palace and go straight to the jail where Caterina is being kept, and you'll pretty much end up having to go find Lucrezia, as she's the one who has the key. You'll then go find her on the top of the palace where she's talking to someone trying to make Cesare jealous, which then leads to you taking her hostage, taking her down to the jail so that you can swap her out with Caterina. After you get Caterina out of the castle, you'll head back to the hideout where Ezio is basically just telling everyone what's just happened. Ezio will then start laying the groundwork of why this game is called Brotherhood and start looking to recruit foot soldiers. After getting some new recruits, you'll hear Ezio's name being whispered, and then you'll meet Leonardo. You'll get a cheeky Metal Gear reference as well with that. And with this, you'll be able to start getting back what you lost from the beginning of this game. You'll go back and destroy some devices to help Leonardo kind of undo what he's done for the Borgia so far that he's been forced to do, such as making kind of like the first set of machine guns in the game. And after all of this, you'll end up meeting up with the assassins once again at the hideout, and during this time you will basically end up talking to Machiavelli. However, you can tell that Ezio is no longer trusting him too much, and you guys basically come to the conclusion that the banker is the best next target for Cesare. After being told about a senator who owes the banker some money, you'll go find him, give him a helping hand, and follow him to where he's apparently going to be meeting up with the banker. Whilst doing so, you end up killing a guard and taking his robes, and with that you end up sneaking in to a party, where you'll find Rodrigo, Cesare, and the banker, aka Juan, who are all there celebrating the beginning of Cesare's conquest to unite Italy. In the next sequence, you'll be helping Bartolomeo out against some French troops on the side of Cesare's anyway, France wants to take over the whole of Italy, however Cesare wants to become the king of Italy, so it's kind of a bit like who's playing who here. But overall, you end up helping out Bartolomeo as his wife gets held captive, and Ezio finds out a pretty much sneaky way of getting in, which it basically just ends up him disguising himself as a guard, so does all the other guys who work for Bartolomeo, and they sneak in. You get into the inner walls, which you basically then go and kill the Baron and rescue Bartolomeo's wife. After all that has happened, Volpe is still not trusting Machiavelli, which is understandable, and he goes to murder him. At the same time though, you have to deal with Cesare, as Cesare is talking to someone who calls themselves one of his closest friends, and this is the start of the end for Cesare. And Cesare also knows about Lucrezia and what she's been doing to try and make him jealous, so he plans to kill the man, and he sends his best assassin to go kill him. You infiltrate the Colosseum, where you see a remaking of Jesus being killed by the Romans taking place, and you go to save Pietro. Whilst he's being looked at by the doctor, Ezio sees a man over in the distance who he recognises, and it all starts flooding back to him. This was the man who was at the villa attack.
Stop! Wait for us!
We thought you had been killed, Sir Ezio.
Not yet.
Where does this passage lead?
To the north, outside the walls.
Let me through. I must go help the troops.
Un momento! You were at the Villa Auditore during the attack.
You'll then find out that this man was the traitor, not Machiavelli. He'll kill himself on your hidden blade, which kind of mimics what ends up happening in the opening prologue sort of thing, with Ezio's dad, which is kind of interesting, but there you go. And then you're off to stop Volpe from pretty much killing Machiavelli, and you're there just in time. After this, the assassins kind of start to feel whole again. There's no more treachery thoughts within the Assassin's Brotherhood. However, this is now the final act of the game, and Ezio and Machiavelli bring Claudia into the Brotherhood. As well as this though, Machiavelli makes Ezio the mentor of the Assassin's Brotherhood, and afterwards you see Ezio once again not letting his new sense of power and ignorance become something that overwhelms him or makes him think that he's more powerful than he is, as he still seeks Machiavelli's wisdom. In the final sequence of this game, Ezio starts heading off to go kill Cesare and Rodrigo, and once you have reached the window in the palace, you basically end up watching and listening in on a conversation. Rodrigo no longer trusts his son and is calling him in a nicer way a spoiled brat. Lucrezia comes in during this conversation and tells Cesare what is going on. However, what she wanted did not happen, and Ezio basically ends up being told where Cesare will go.
What has happened
I
here?
don't know what you mean.
My funds, my troops, gone!
Financial difficulties strike all of us, even those with an army.
You intend to give me money?
No, I do not.
Then I will use the Peace of Eden to get what I want. Your help is not necessary.
That has been made abundantly clear to me. Are you aware that the Baron de Valois is dead?
No. Did you?
What reason could I possibly have to kill him? Was he plotting against me with my brilliant traitorous
I
captain?
do not have to stand for this.
The assassins.
Why did you not stop them?
As if I could. It was not my decision to attack Monteriggione. It was yours. It is high time you took responsibilities for your actions.
My accomplishments! Despite the constant interference of failures like you!
You are not going anywhere. I have the Peace of Eden.
Get out of my way, old man.
I gave you everything, and yet it's never enough.
Cesare! He intends to poison you!
You would not listen to reason.
Father, do you not see? I control all of this. If I want to live, I live. If I want to take, I take. If I want you to die, you die! Where is the Peace of Eden?
Stop! I know where it is!
And you did not tell me he had taken it?
Cesare, it's me, your queen.
You are my sister, nothing more. Where is it?
You never loved me?
Where is the apple? Tell me! Tell me!
After beating him to the apple, you'll use it against his armies and use it as an army itself, and you'll take out the remains of the Borgia. Cesare will run away, and you basically end up going back to the assassin's hideout, where Ezio will discuss with all the others what is going to happen next. He calls upon the others to come help him and end Cesare's rule once and for all. You and the other assassins have Cesare cornered, and he believes that the army coming up behind him is about to help him retake Rome. However, it's actually Fabio, and he is about to arrest Cesare. Now though, before I get into the ending of Brotherhood's story, I want to also go over how he escapes, as it's not actually explicitly said in the games themselves, but if you look online, and apparently within one of the books, Cesare escapes using his friend Micheletto, who was the assassin from earlier, who gave him a rope apparently in prison. It doesn't really get explained, but it pretty much goes from him being arrested to then he's alive and Ezio's fighting him in the final sequence. It fades to a basic cutscene where you're back at the beginning of the game. The cutscene where Ezio is trying to kill Cesare. After doing some running around and killing and fighting, you end up killing Cesare, and in his dying words, he is still as delusional as he has been throughout the whole game. Ezio then claims that he's going to let fate decide his death by dropping off the castle walls. It's actually very historically accurate, as that is kind of what happened to him in real life. Obviously not a like-for-like actual interpretation of what happened, but very similar to it. Now after this, you see Ezio locking away the apple underneath the Colosseum, and that is exactly where you're going to head to in the modern day. After the modern day assassins end up where they need to be, they end up talking to Juno. More specifically, Desmond ends up talking to Juno, and basically, she'll end up talking and rambling on about some stuff that you'll understand different parts of, but you won't understand all of it, as even with the most up-to-date games, it doesn't even come close to what some of the theories suggest, such as Layla is a descendant of Eve. Which also, after doing some delving into AC lore, one thing that I did find fascinating, because obviously a lot of Assassin's Creed lore is to do with different mythologies and religion in general, and part of that is that Cain and Abel does happen in Assassin's Creed story, and Abel wins, and after killing Cain, he pretty much ends up starting the Templar Order, so I thought that was a little fun fact just to throw in there as well. Anyways, when Desmond touches the apple, he ends up being forced to kill Lucy. Now, according to Juno, Lucy was about to betray Desmond anyway once he got the apple, which would go against Juno's plan to be freed within AC3. So she activates the bleeding effect and forces Desmond to kill Lucy, which then fades to black, and you hear William Mars, aka Desmond's dad, talking briefly. Alrighty, and with the story of Brotherhood all wrapped up for you, we're now going to talk about the actual gameplay and just overall thoughts on the game itself, what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it. So yeah, the opening to this game is amazing. Honestly, it's one of the best openings in all of these games, and one of the best moments of foreshadowing. However, it is blatantly obvious what is going to happen. But again, the foreshadowing in this game is amazing, and it causes Ezio to not trust everyone around him anymore. The fact that they spend half an hour at the beginning of this game setting up one of the best villains in this entire franchise, it's done in such an impeccable way. Not only is it done so amazingly, but you also see Ezio is now classed as a master assassin and is literally in the next part of the game called the leader of the Brotherhood. However, he still has tons to learn. Even though what he chose to do with Rodrigo was the morally correct thing to do and let his rage go, in that moment he now realizes the actions that happen when you do not fulfill what he needed to do, and that is what ends up leading to Mario's death.
I know you're there, Ezio! The Pope told me about you and your little group of assassins. And this! Give me the gun his friend fashioned for us. We've had too much bloodshed. I think the cleansing is in order. So consider this an invitation from my family to yours!
This is showing the player that honestly killing Rodrigo is actually the justifiable action. Because of this, basically the villain ends up getting attacked because he chose to accept, not letting vengeance overwhelm him and everything like that, choosing the moral high ground. And because of that, the villain ends up getting attacked, he loses his family, and everything starts falling to pieces once again, and the Borgia retain their power that they had, and not only that, gain even more so. This opening, like the previous, is the same again, where he is learning a lesson from this. His life is about to change again, and this is something that is, yes, it's a big event that may cause massive character development, but it isn't like moments after this he is just suddenly a changed character. He grows over time, he isn't just changed by one event. Now, all in all, this game is just amazing. It takes everything that everyone loved about Assassin's Creed 2 and just expands upon it. With that being said though, one of the things that just does continue to end up being a failure of the future of Assassin's Creed is the extra content, in my opinion. Just the amount of random stuff that ends up being added in this game, it literally clutters the hell out of your map. Even though I just don't bother with a lot of it, it just irritates me. I know that obviously a lot of people are completionists and they actually want to do that sort of thing, but overall it just takes up so much areas on your map. I also don't like the encampment areas, if I'm being honest. I know that this is something that pops up in future games anyway. However, this doesn't really fully pop up again in its fullest extent until Unity, Rogue, and eventually on a bigger scale in a Syndicate. Honestly though, overall I really enjoyed my time playing through this game once again. I haven't played this game for ages, and honestly the only major mechanical fault that I had playing through it is when Volpe is about to kill Machiavelli. I kept on falling into water, well not falling, I tried jumping across the lake twice, and both times I ended up glitching under the map to a massive degree, and it meant that I just had to sit out and wait out the timer. And this got very annoying, primarily because, you know, normally you can just jump into water. It specifically says to complete 100% sync to this mission, don't go into the water. What it really should be stating is, literally, do not go into the water, otherwise your game will be broken. And then something that happened frequently throughout the game for me was the assassination lock and how it just kept on locking onto the wrong people. I'd go to kill someone that was a highlighted character, and mid-animation the game would just choose to lock onto another person that I wasn't meant to be killing. The most noticeable point that this was happening was on screen now, where I was trying to kill the French Baron and it kept on locking onto Bartolomeo's wife. It happened in different moments, such as when I was trying to take one of the forts and it just chose the wrong character, so they ended up hiding away in the fort. However, one thing that I really do want to talk about in terms of this game, and one of the areas that I really want to just highlight that is a great aspect of it, is how much better this game looks than AC2. The graphics are improved for one, like to a fairly decent degree. Not only that, but not everything is blindingly white, to the point where even if anyone was trying to fall asleep and they end up playing this game, they're not falling asleep anytime soon, as that is keeping you awake. The world as well is amazing in this game. Honestly, I'd say it's on the same level as Florence in Assassin's Creed 2. It feels as alive as Florence, and honestly, it's probably one of the AC's first ever proper attempts of doing a massive city game, and I loved it in my opinion. I think though the story itself is almost on par with AC2. I was considering saying that it is better than AC2, but after some further just thoughts of the game, I think AC2 just has a lot more going for it. But the overall actual thing I'll give AC Brotherhood overall is I think Cesare was a lot more better of a villain. He was built up anyway a lot better with a lot more character development. Honestly, nothing beats AC Revelations in my opinion. Many of you may disagree with me here. AC2 is still my favourite one of these three, but Old Man Ezio you cannot defeat. Now in Revelations, you begin right as Brotherhood had ended in the modern day, listening into Subject 17, aka Clay, talk to you about everything that's happened in between the two games. It explains to you in not an annoying way, and basically for the people who haven't played 2 or Brotherhood, what has gone on in those two games. Then Desmond awakes. He finds 16 and basically ends up talking to him and is told about how he's still actually stuck in the Animus, but on the original ground floor of the system. After walking through the Animus, you get brought into the world that you love. It starts with the trailer for Revelations, which is done so wonderfully, I might add, like honestly one of the best ever. Now after all that, you'll then start working on how to find Altair's library. Once you come into contact with the library, you'll end up finding out that you need the Mastaff keys to actually get in. The Templars already have one, and after doing some Mario Kart, you end up hunting down the Templar in charge of this entire expedition for the Templars, and you'll kill him, finding out kind of what's going to start happening throughout the game. And with that though, you get kicked out of the memory and brought back into the base layer of the Animus once again. After this, you'll get told that each time you do anything, completing a sequence in this game, you'll have the Animus take you out of pretty much the Ezio memory and bring you back into the base layer. This is more done, in my opinion, in a very nice way to kind of give Subject 16 a bit more of an identity within the game, because they kind of gave him a little bit of an idea that he was kind of crazy and all that sort of thing, but reality, the reason why he went crazy was because the Animus screwed with his mind so much, and I think this allowed him to have much more character development than what was actually given to him ever. And it was done in a way that wasn't too irritating. When you get kicked out the Animus, sure, it takes you out of the game for like maybe a minute at most or 2 minutes, but they're really short and kind of get to the point of what's going on, and I think it's done really well. But after this, you end up going back into the world of Ezio once again, where Ezio is writing to Claudia, discussing his journey and why he's now heading to Constantinople. This is something that reappears throughout the game, and honestly, I love this, primarily as someone who loves AC lore, and I think people who do love AC lore will also enjoy massively. You're now in Constantinople, and Ezio is amazed of the new place, and basically ends up talking to a guy about how it's the culture hub of the world connecting Europe and Asia. The man you're talking to, though, is someone that you'll meet later on. Ezio sees Zofia as well for the first time in this game, and in a joking manner, you'll see him do this.
When I was your age, my interests were mainly salve.
Incredible. I am surprised you got anything done.
As was my mother.
You'll then meet Yusuf for the first time, who's the mentor of the assassins in Istanbul. Ezio is then also referred to as the Grand Mentor, and honestly kind of shows that over the time of Assassin's Creed, he's kind of then at this point kind of deemed as like the wisest and best assassin of all, especially of all time at that point, I think, because Altair is still considered one of the wisest ever, and Ezio definitely looks up to him, but especially for the time, Ezio is considered the best, wisest, and overall most talented assassin. To the point where when he does go to Istanbul, he kind of overranks Yusuf. In a way, he's kind of looked at more as like the actual overall leader of what's going on, but Yusuf still is technically in charge because he's the actual mentor in Istanbul. After a nice walk around the big city, you'll find Brotherhood's location, and with that you'll begin the basic training of the hook blade. You'll also learn some basic parkour mechanics, just making it easier and faster to get around this city, and after all the tutorials are done, you'll get a lovely view from the very top of the city. Now once you've learned all the traversal of this game, you're basically then going to do your first ever den defense mission, which if you're just doing the storyline like I was for this video, it'll be the only time that you actually do this mini game. It's effectively the type of game that you could get on an app or whatever on your phone. However, it's just an Assassin's Creed game, especially for the time this would have been considered quite decent, but it's no Gwent. Not too boring, but to be honest, it's still a little bit sleepy overall. Ezio will then meet back up with Yusuf, who is doing some more assassin activity, and overall basically gives you another tutorial of the Templar dens, the same as how they worked in AC Brotherhood. During this though, you'll pretty much learn how also bombs work and the different ways of using them. I would say this sequence of the game is basically just a more just tutorial sequence. There isn't really much going on, no story is being driven, nothing like that. Basically just teaching the player everything that's new that's happened. They don't really go out of their way to kind of try and force you to learn all the old stuff, because I believe this game was pretty much made with the intention of people who've played the previous ones having played this, so I'm glad that they didn't just force it down your throat to do an entire in-depth sequence again. You'll now be kicked out of the Animus of Ezio's memories anyway, and you'll start talking to 16 once again. He's talking about maybe finding a way of going through the Animus with you and pretty much burying his consciousness inside of someone's memories, try and get out in some way. It's just weird, I guess. He's basically trying to figure out a way of burying his consciousness into Ezio, or someone within Ezio's mind with Desmond, and trying to get out that way, but I don't really know how that would work in particular for him. You'll then help Yusuf by building the Order a little bit more and recruiting a man who becomes Ezio's apprentice. You'll learn after doing this about someone who's been assassinating the assassin. This is kind of a random side part of the story that doesn't really do anything and serve the actual basis of the actual narrative of this game. It kind of just pretty much just shows you an idea of the mistreatment the assassins do cause towards the people they teach as well, kind of giving you a little bit of an observation of how in Assassin's Creed you are kind of shown the assassin's point of view of how everything is all perfect from their eyes and everything like that. You never really get shown the Templars' point of view until 3 anyway, and even then I'd say that you don't actually get given a proper good Templar story of kind of the differences between each side until probably Rogue and Unity. Unity kind of dabbles into it a little bit with having some good Templars and also some bad Templars, but Rogue kind of gives you the actual justified idea of, okay, they're basically doing the same things to reach the same goal, just one believes in security, one believes in freedom. Overall, I'd just say this is filler content, especially in comparison to the rest of the game. Pretty much this game would probably be about 7 to 10 hours if they only did what was important to the story. You kind of have some random side bits in there that you're forced to do that really have no reason to be there. Ezio then learns how to build bombs and also meets Zofia for the first time properly in this game, and their romance starts to blossom, as that is the person who Ezio ends up marrying in the end. With many of their sequences, you'll get to see how even at 51, Ezio still knows how to charm the ladies. You'll find one Mastaff key underneath her library, and once you've returned from Sophia's shop, she agrees to basically decrypt the map for you and help you find out where the other keys are. After Ezio talks briefly to Yusuf again, you head to the hideout, and Ezio will then start reliving the memory of Altair through one of the keys. I believe that's kind of how it works. I'm pretty sure he's basically tapping into kind of like what the Animus does, but through the keys. We're using his ECU blood, I believe, something like that. If I am wrong, let me know in the comments. But I think that's kind of basically what is happening. It's really cool though. I think it really caps off Altair's story though in a lot better of a way. I found this game though overall did make me love Altair as a character a lot more than the first game ever did. During the first game, I kind of felt like it was just a bit slow and a bit boring. But during this, you'll pretty much end up going to the top of the castle and trying to stop the man who's betraying the Brotherhood from killing Al-Mulim.
You put too much faith in the hearts of men, Altair. The Templars know the truth. Humans are weak, base, and petty.
No. Our creed is evidence to the contrary.
Perhaps I am not wise enough to understand, but I suspect the opposite. That I am too wise to believe such rubbish.
You offered him a chance to salvage his dignity. Why? No man should pass from this world without knowing some kindness. But he shunned your graces, as was his right. Altair, I have watched you grow from a boy to a man in so short a time. It fills me with as much sadness as pride. You fit your father's shoes as if they had been tailored to your feet.
I did not know him well as a father. He was an assassin, above all.
You too were born into this order. Do you regret it?
How can I regret the only life I've ever known?
You may find a way in time, and it will choose the path you prefer. Come, my boy, and ready your blade. This battle is not yet won.
Now this death shows you Altair basically believes more in the Creed above all else. The Templar is telling him the truth about the human race, but Altair talks about how the Creed stands for the opposite and shows that there is light in freedom of the human race. This is something that I love about Unity, as it addresses it more in the idea of both sides are kind of needed for proper development, because effectively it's very similar to politics today. Like, both sides serve a general argument to both get somewhere in life. Altair though in this moment shows that you should respect everyone, even if they're your enemy, especially in their dying moments. After this, you end up speaking to the Romanians and helping her people out, and basically that's again another mission that kind of serves no purpose to the general narrative of this game. However, you then also continue on that little assassin quest line and find out the reason why the assassin betrayed the Brotherhood. And it's actually because when the Turkish invaded his homeland, the assassins sat back and did nothing, and he believes that that was a betrayal of himself and the people he stands for, not just the Creed. He believes that the Creed should serve everyone, not just the side that's winning. And I know that kind of is obvious, because they do that a lot within the Assassin's Creed games anyway. They kind of serve the side that's losing in almost every aspect of each game, or at least serve what would be classed as the moral good. However, I think it's basically kind of trying to show you that the assassins kind of serve who they need to serve, so that they can stay alive, but also try and do the right thing if it is possible. You then cut back to see Ezio writing a letter to Claudia where she's updating her on everything that's happened so far once again and what he is planning to do. Sequence 4 starts with Ezio and Yusuf talking about basically the possible assassination of the prince. After disguising as one of the most annoying people in AC history, you'll head in to find the prince who you're protecting, and the man who you actually met on the boat is in fact the prince. I then personally went and just did the story missions of Sophia. You end up meeting Duccio again. Basically, this is the man who cheated on Claudia right at the beginning of AC2, and you basically meet him and pretty much beat him up at the beginning of AC2 anyway. But I thought this scene was pretty great. I think this is like one of the best nods to any of the previous Assassin's Creed games you're ever going to get.
Mia cara, the strings of fate have drawn us together. Two Italiani, lost and alone in the Orient. Do you not feel the magnetismo?
I feel many things, Messere. Nausea above all.
Is this man bothering you, Sophia?
Excuse me, Messere, but the lady and I are... Oh! Oh, il diavolo in persona! Stay back!
Duccio, a pleasure.
Run, buona donna! Run for your life!
Who was that?
Un cane. He was engaged to my sister many years ago.
And what happened?
His cat so was engaged to 6 others. Chiedo bene. Yeah. So what brings you to these docks?
Once you've retrieved the map with Ezio and Sophia, they'll be looking over it and basically talk about how amazing it is, how especially for the time they didn't know that the Americas existed, and they kind of had a brief idea but not fully. Ezio kind of learns this a little bit in AC2 when they're discussing about there's a bigger world out there, all this sort of thing. You get to see a whole view of the entire world instead of the little bit that they know of, because especially at the time they only kind of knew about parts of Asia, parts of Europe, parts of Africa, and then basically little bits of South and North America. After saving the prince's life, he'll then send you basically to have a look and see if the guard captain is committing any form of treachery. Before the sequence ends, you'll hunt down more of the books to find out where the second key is. You'll then head back to the hideout where you'll learn even more about Altair's history. After the ending of Assassin's Creed 1 where he kills Al-Mulim because of him being a Templar deep down, he ends up serving the Templars. He pretty much ends up seeing how the events of it occurred afterwards, where they kind of betrayed Altair, believing that he actually wasn't killing him because he wanted to stop him from using the apple. It's that secretly Altair wanted to use the apple over him instead and use it for his own power. After retrieving what you need from that memory, basically Ezio then kind of briefly talk about how he actually respects Altair at the age of 26, becoming the mentor of the assassins. Ezio will do some snooping around for more information about the guard captain after this, and basically the assassins will stage a riot which allows Ezio to pretty much get in and see the delivery of arms coming into the city. You'll find one of the two brothers who wants the throne, and with that, he says he's with a man who's got massive influence over the people. This is kind of one of the first times that you kind of see someone who could be an actual Templar properly, as they never really fully go out their way to show you them too much. Ezio retrieves the rifles, and whilst he's doing so, he kind of gets caught, so he has to run away. He'll then talk to Sophia briefly about more of the books and find out even more about the keys and find another one entirely. You'll then learn more about Altair and how his wife died. In sequence 6 though, you basically end up finding out what the guard captain was doing. You go to kill him, and in his dying words you find out that he was actually loyal to the true king the entire time and was trying to fight against the Templars. This kind of gives you your first sneaking suspicion that really the actual Templars are both of the sons. You don't really get told that until literally later on. Ezio then meets up with Sophia once again, more romance brewing throughout the entire thing, and you kind of see their relationship truly start where Sophia has set down a little picnic for the both of them. After telling the prince as well about Turek, how he actually was innocent and not trying to hunt him down, you end up going to find more of the books after this, find the last key that you need, and Ezio will then learn more about Altair and basically him coming back to the Creed. Most of the assassins welcomed Altair back with open arms basically. Altair then tells Abbas what really happened to his dad in Abbas's dying moments anyway, but Abbas still doubts this entirely. Ezio then commit a small act of terrorism, escape the city, the basic sort of stuff that the assassins do throughout the games, blows up a massive bomb so that he can get out with his ship, and then also flamethrowers a load of ships in the harbour who are trying to kill him. After this though, Ezio is then brought out the Animus once again and talking to 16 about what he thinks about his life. The beginning of the end has now started, and Ezio will now be in another region of Turkey called Cappadocia. Or Cappadocia. I don't know. I probably butchered that entirely. Hopefully not too bad, but you can let me know. When you're there, you'll then go and help a spy out who's basically one of the contacts you've been told to reach, and you have to help her basically save some of her people. In doing so, Ezio will then kill Shakulu. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Again, another probably absolute butchery of a name. After this though, basically you'll end up using a massive bomb. Again, a small act of terrorism because the assassins need to do so because, suits the cause. Basically, you'll then kill Manuel and retrieve the last key that he actually needs. After that, though, however, you kind of meet Hamet and find out that he's the Grand Master of the new Templar Order in, Constantinople. This is something that I think they actually did really well. I completely forgot that he was the actual Grand Templar entirely. You kind of get little snippets of yeah, he probably is. But overall, I completely forgot this, and I thought they did this really well, and actually, I was genuinely surprised when it happened. I was like, oh, he's turned up. Okay, yeah, he must be the Templar. I didn't actually remember that at all, because it's been a while since I played Revelations. After escaping, you'll see one of the last stories of Altair and him using the apple to get the Polo brothers out of the castle so that they can hide the Mastaff keys away. One thing that I love about this sequence though is it shows how much he's actually used the apple and learned from it massively, because in comparison to Ezio and Brotherhood, where Ezio is borderline dying when he's using the actual apple, Altair basically can use it with no issue. He seems to have some issue right at the end, but I don't know if that's his old age kicking in or if it's the case that the apple was taking effect on him. Altair basically then just says how he's kind of done with the fight and doesn't want to be an assassin anymore. He kind of wants to now just, be done with life. He's lived it to the full extent that he can, and Ezio, I think, is this kind of Ezio's moment where he realizes to himself that, yeah, he's kind of hit that point as well. And that's kind of the end of Revelations in terms of like his actual story. He wants to become, something more than just the assassin who hunts people down. He wants to have a family. However, once Ezio is back in Constantinople, you'll find yourself heading to the hideout where Yusuf has died, probably one of the more impactful deaths throughout the story. I say Mario is basically first, then it's Yusuf, and then probably Ezio's entire family dying, besides his mother and sister, obviously. But Ezio then wants to kill Amet even more because of this. Before doing so, though, he ends up talking to Amet and pretty much has to do a deal for Sophia's life. Ezio will gather the other assassins and grant one of them, who you've kind of never even, you don't care about at all. I don't even know if it was the person that's your apprentice or whatever. Basically, he just gets given the grant of master over the entire assassin brotherhood there. You end up doing some more Mario Kart and pretty much start flying like an eagle over the top of the carriage, plucking people off their horses, killing them, and so on and so on. Before Ezio gets to kill him, however, he gets thrown off the side of the cliff by Aleem. Aleem will then cast out Ezio, and Desmond is then taken out of the memory so he can be with 16 once again. 16 then sacrifices his own life, the actual end of it. Obviously, in physical form, he is dead, but in the Animus, he buried his consciousness there. So this is now the last remnants of him being killed fully, and he basically sacrificed himself so that Desmond can live because the Animus's underground is being deleted. When you're back in Ezio's memories, you'll be entering Altair's library and relive his final moments of him hiding the apple in the library. Ezio will then go to grab the apple, however, he chooses to leave it as he knows it's too powerful for the world of men. Ezio will then proceed to just drop his hidden blades and his sword. This is kind of like him finally accepting that his current self, and basically what he wants to do now, which is live a life with Sophia. He doesn't want to be the assassin anymore. It's too lonely a life for him now, and he's basically accepting that he's too old for it. He needs to move on. The Isu will then start talking to Desmond directly again, and pretty much go over the Doomsday event and set up fully for AC3 and what is going to become when Desmond then awakes from the Animus, and that is the beginning of AC3. This game is one of greatness, even though it's considered the most boring one of all three and the worst one of all three of these games. I still think it does a perfect job of summarizing Ezio's entire story, finishing it off, and also concluding Altair's story. This game was blatantly made just to finish off the actual Ezio storyline and also set up for Assassin's Creed 3, as they couldn't really just jump from 2 to 3, it wouldn't make too much sense, but also overall it's the overall story of Ezio finishing up. He's too old now to continue and he wants to just live a life of peace and just with his wife. In Embers as well, which is the end 20 minutes sort of like short film sort of thing that you can watch, would 100% recommend watching it, as it ends an amazing story of a guy who is one of the most beloved gaming characters in the history of gaming, and honestly has one of my favorite quotes in the whole of gaming in it.
When I was a young man, I had liberty, but I did not see it. I had time, but I did not know it. And I had love, but I did not feel it. Many decades would pass before I understood the meaning of all three.
Now this game's amazing in my eyes, but its story could have been basically told over around about 5 sequences. It didn't actually need to be like the 8 it was. Which technically on Google it says it's actually 9, when in reality I think it's like 8 and then the actual ending of the game, at least from what I played, unless I missed the bit that pops up saying sequence 9. At worst, I'd say this game is basically just bloated for a 12-hour game anyway. It was very much a beautiful climax to the ending of this amazing trilogy. Definitely worth a playthrough, and not only that, just a little side note, Ezio looks the best in this game. I'm sorry, old man Ezio just looks 100% better than all the other Ezios. His outfit, his hair, his beard, everything about him looks perfect in this game. I do not care if it comes across as if I'm fanboying or as if I'm into him. I could understand if you think that. However, I'm not. I just think he looks amazing in this game, and honestly, it's one of the best designs I've ever seen a character in terms of actual progression. I think a lot of games do try their best to show off progression throughout their games, but they don't have the time span that they did with these 3 games. The opening of this game is something that I truly do love. I think it sets up the story in just a perfect way. It's a story about Ezio accepting he is near the end of his life, and honestly finishing off Altair's story was just done so well. Making a character that in my opinion was fairly dull in the first AC game into one that honestly comes across really likeable and generally more sympathetic. This game's opening gives you an idea over the last 30 years of Ezio's growth as an assassin and person as a whole, how much more wiser he's become and how much of an amazing assassin he has become as well. It also gives you the ideal pacing for this game. Honestly, I would say throughout the entire playthrough I never felt like it it strayed from the pacing from the beginning of the game, so I think that's a good job. Who knows if that means that it was boring from the start or whatnot. Personally, I did enjoy my recent replay through, however it does still have the same clunky mechanics as Brotherhood and 2, but again, for the time, it is all good, so we'll accept that considering the game came out in like 2012. The modern day story isn't honestly anything that spectacular in my opinion within the Ezio trilogy. Besides honestly gaining the apple, not much really happens besides that. This is honestly just setting up for the AC3 plot and the penultimate ending to Desmond's story. The first game is setting you up for all the AC2 story of Assassin's Creed and more lore towards the overall game. Brotherhood is simply just setting you up for finding the apple and getting to the end of the game in Revelations. Revelations simply just sets up the Doomsday plot within Assassin's Creed more than anything. Obviously it starts to get set up within 2, but it kind of ends up being properly set up by the end of Revelations. They did one thing though perfect, which was they didn't take you out the game for unnecessary moments within these games. Black flag. Now though, one of the things that I do love about these games overall is they just sets you up for Assassin's Creed 3. The whole franchise in general, and when it comes to the lore, is built up so well within these 3 games. All in all, one thing that I do actually take back from playing through these games again recently is that a lot of people like to talk about how the modern day has no plotline in modern day Assassin's Creed games, especially in like, for example, Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla. However, to be honest, I would say currently their modern day right now is kind of what it was like during like this trilogy. The modern day doesn't really play a massive part in the story until pretty much 3. After that, 4 doesn't really have much for modern day. Unity, not much for modern day. Syndicate, again, not mass amounts of modern day, really pretty much not much. Origins, a little bit. Odyssey, more, and then Valhalla, not much again, but still a little bit. It was like one of the only things I liked about Valhalla, if I'm being honest. But these games honestly showed me that they don't need to really focus massively on the modern day for Assassin's Creed stories to be so good, so I don't understand why the Assassin's Creed fanboys were crying over this so much, when in reality, in my opinion, I think this was actually done really well this time, so I don't see what's wrong with it being done the way it was now. I think 3 was really good, and I love 3 to pieces, but honestly, there was parts of 3 where you just get taken out of the Animus for like a 30-minute sequence, or 20 to 30-minute sequences where you're taken out of the story, and it kind of just interrupts your gameplay experience and your immersion, and honestly, as much as they were great sequences to take part in, but they just take you out of the story that you're actually there for, which is the actual past events of the ancestors. Ezio, in my opinion, is one of the best characters in the whole of gaming, and it's not just my opinion, a lot of people also agree with that. However, this isn't something, though, that was done over the course of one game, like a lot of other games. For example, people love Geralt. Yes, there was Witcher 1 and 2, but most people played Witcher 3 and loved Geralt from that game. Not only that, you also have games like The Last of Us, where they had 12 hours to make you love the characters Ellie and Joel, and they did a perfect job at that, and I think they get really underrated for that actual fact. But you've also got characters like Haytham and Edward within the franchise itself, who are beloved characters, and they had really short screen times if you consider it, especially in comparison to Ezio. I think Ezio was the perfectly crafted character. Honestly, from start to finish, they did him amazingly. They showed off how well he is in just all aspects of life, all of his downfalls, everything, and I think they did it so well that honestly I can understand why people would say he is the best character ever created in gaming. Literally, if you consider that at the beginning of AC2, you meet Ezio when he's being given birth to, and not only that, you then see him as a brash young teenager who honestly doesn't know what's going to happen. He ends up having to deal with the loss of his family, deals with so much stuff throughout his story, and then you basically end up seeing a guy who eventually becomes one of the wisest people in the entire Brotherhood, which you can take that as either he's one of the most stupid people in the world because he believes in the assassins and all that sort of thing, but if you like Assassin's Creed and like the philosophy of kind of like what the assassins stand for within it, at least if you're looking at it as the universe's perspective of the game, then he becomes literally one of the wisest people to ever exist within Assassin's Creed. And they do it in a way that doesn't feel pushed down your throat at all. But not only this, by the end of his time being an assassin, he starts to realise that honestly both sides are the same side, they just have different end goals about it. And it's honestly something that you don't really see too much within the early Assassin's Creed games. Revelations really is the closest thing to it, because you have Ahmed, who basically tells him a slight idea of, oh, basically the assassins just do what the Templars want as well. They both want the same thing, they just have different ways of getting there. Now, this is something that Ezio kind of brushes off, but it's something that he definitely does end up thinking about. Ezio's character development is actually done really well in my opinion, and honestly doesn't change because of big events. He just kind of slowly becomes wiser and wiser, which is something that games don't like to do. First time you see his change in temperament is honestly when he's killing Alberto. He kind of pronounces his name and tells everyone who he is in a brash and arrogant way, not knowing really what the actual repercussions for doing so. He kind of does it, you know, in his like, you know, full of rage moment, and honestly going against one of the main principles of the Creed, which is killing in plain sight, which honestly, again, he isn't part of the Creed at this point, so it's not intended to be breaking the rule, but it's kind of there, kind of showing you that initial starting point for him. Not only is this kill done in such a boastful way, which is honestly something that none of the assassins ever actually want to do, especially when they become master level assassins, he also doesn't even respect the person when they're dying, and it's the case of there is as much anger and venomosity that you can have towards someone. That's the point of Assassin's Creed's like actual methods of the ending when they kill people, always saying rest in peace in their own native language and basically being respectful of that person, because the assassins are still valuing the life that they have taken. They accept that life is life and that you are taking someone's from them, and they need to respect them for that. Or at least if there isn't respect, it's giving the person peace, because as much as you may hate them, they deserve peace in the end. He then learns more of this sort of thing after killing someone that he had grown up as adversaries with, both of which not knowing the full context of what they actually stood for. Vieri is a young brash man who was just doing what his father told him to, and basically doing the bidding of all of the Templars without actually knowing what he was doing. So yeah, he was just blindly following the orders of these guys. Ezio is a naive young guy who doesn't actually know what he's doing really. He's basically just in the position because his father wanted him to carry out the last act. And not only that, he ends up just following what Mario tells him to. Neither one of these characters understands the role they're actually playing. In the story that dates all the way back to Cain and Abel, Ezio wins the battle between the two of them, but in his moments of pure rage, he just ends up there screaming at Vieri. And that's when Mario teaches him the main thing that all assassins should uphold, and that is respect. And that is respect to the people, even if they're in the wrong, they're in their dying moments, and that they should be at rest. After this, throughout the games, you just kind of see him continue on with this ideology when assassinating his targets. However, one thing does show up in each game in the moment that he ends up letting his emotions completely overwhelm what he is doing. However, he deals with them in slightly different ways in each game. In AC2, when he's battling Rodrigo for the final time, he goes to murder him and basically tells him that he is completely out of revenge and rage. Yes, by this point, he is completely fueled by this. But he knows this is not what the actual assassins stand for, and because of this he needs to accept his duty and not do it because of revenge or rage. It is when you see him at the end spare Rodrigo's life that you see him actually having learnt from his mistakes and basically letting his wisdom and his old age, at least at this point, obviously he's not that old, he's like 40 at this point, but overall you see him kind of see the idea that you shouldn't just let yourself be fueled by revenge and hate, as it just drives him through a 20-year crusade, and that's pretty much all he does throughout the first 20 years of his life. Because the first 20 years, he is a kid. The next 20 years from being an adult, it is just fueled by revenge. However, in the second game, you then see that he actually did make a massive mistake by letting Rodrigo live. He says though, however, that he's letting fate decide Cesare's life at the end of Brotherhood, which is again another sort of thing to a nod of kind of not letting the revenge and want to kill overwhelm him. Even though he does 100% know that the Fool is going to kill Cesare, but it's just a way of kind of giving the character of Cesare that final bit of, you know, respect and peace that he was meant to be giving him, as he can't give him the basic rest in peace that he wants to give him and that sort of talk. So pretty much he ends up just pushing him off the cliff. So Cesare is right. He doesn't technically die by a man. He doesn't die by a god though either. That's what he was expecting to have happen, but that did not happen to him. He dies by a fool, which again is actually very reminiscent of what happens to him in real life. Ezio though isn't perfect, and with that you see him in his old age, when he's becoming more and more frustrated. It could either be that he's just becoming more short-tempered, or whatever emotions are going through him, he'll still say rest in peace you bastard, and with that you basically end up seeing a character who is supposed to be the epitome of the assassins, supposed to be the purest of the pure, and honestly still can't actually take his emotions out of the work that he is doing. Ezio is a character that gets around about 70 hours worth of character development. He keeps the charming ways, but as he grows from a naive young man who questions everything to one who doesn't need to pose the questions, as he learns that some questions he doesn't need to know the answer to. Ezio, by the end of his days, is just wanting to have a simple life with his family. After he completes his duties as an assassin, all he wants to do is live his life with Zofia and his kids. Ezio's last words being, "When I was a young man, I had liberty but did not see it. I had time but did not know it, and I had love but did not feel it. Many decades would pass until I would understand the meaning of all three." I think this is one of the most beautiful send-offs for a character ever in gaming in general, And honestly, each of those three are kind of what makes up all three of the games. Making use of time, it allowed him to gain liberty for other people, and not only that, gain liberty for himself and allowed him to learn what love was in the end. Liberty, he learns by the end of AC2. He learns that people should have the choice of free will. By the end of Brotherhood, he learns what time is, and he kind of understands that he's getting older and that time is something that he's let himself kind of slip by and continue on, and realizes that he kind of needs to slow down as a character. But not only this, in Revelations, that's when he finds love, and I think that is what they were going for when they talk about these, as these three are kind of like the quintessential parts of Ezio's life overall, and these three pillars of Ezio's are kind of pretty much what each game stands for, if you look down to the core of them, especially for Ezio's character development anyway. Ezio as a character is one that is done so well it's ridiculous. He changes over time in such a subtle way and he's just crafted perfectly. You see him go from being a naive young guy to becoming the leader of Brotherhood at the age of 40 to 42, and then eventually becoming that wise older just mentor figure overall for the Brotherhood as an entire structure by the end of Revelations, and he just wants to move on with his life, and you just see it from start to finish, and they do it in such a way that doesn't feel so just drawn out and to the point where you just don't want to play anymore. I love Ezio and this story just as a whole. I have ever since the day I put that disc into my 360 almost a decade ago now. I was 10 at the time, and honestly, all I can say is that these games will continue to amaze me even in the next 10 years time. Even though they're old, they're still perfect, and honestly there's nothing that Ubisoft can bring out at this current stage in Assassin's Creed which will beat Assassin's Creed 2 especially. Now that being said, I give this game an overall of an 8.5 out of 10. I would give this game a 10 out of 10 if I was allowing myself to be completely biased, as this is in first place, tied as my favourite game ever, at least Assassin's Creed 2 anyway. It's tied first with Skyrim, however, I can't really say that either one of them are on the scale, for example, of Witcher 3, and I gave Witcher 3 a 9.5 out of 10. So I can't really say that, you know, AC2 is better than The Witcher 3, because if you're looking at it from an actual critical standpoint, AC2 is not better than Witcher 3. Overall, in my heart, it is. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It did take me a very long time to make. If you wouldn't mind leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more content like this on the future. I made a Witcher critique, so if you do want to go check that out as well, go ahead. I think it was done pretty well as well, especially for my first one. This was my second one. I'll see you guys in the next one, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to let me know in the comments. Let me know what games you want me to do in the future. If you want to join the Discord, it is down below. I want to build that up eventually so that I can have just a group of people to talk to about different things, different games, bring you onto the channel, that sort of thing, as eventually I will be starting a podcast with my friends and we're going to be discussing games and a load of different other areas of life. So if that does interest you, make sure to join the Discord, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.